7 Loomian Legacy characters perfectly embody the 7 heavenly virtues. For those who don't know, the 7 heavenly virtues are 7 types of virtues, or forms of positive behavior, that were created to oppose the 7 deadly sins. These virtues include kindness, charity, temperance, diligence, chastity, humility, and patience. Today we will review each virtue, and see which major or minor Loomian Legacy character fits them the best, starting with kindness. Kindness is the ability to be polite, respectful, and helpful to others without expecting anything in return. For each definition, I will also be adding the corresponding sin that juxtaposes it. In this case, kindness is the opposite of the sin of envy, and while many Loomian Legacy characters are very kind, the one that best represents this virtue is one you're all likely familiar with, Jake. Jake's history dates all the way back to Pokemon Brick Bronze, where he's portrayed as an optimistic loyal companion to the player. However, things took a seemingly drastic turn once Team Eclipse kidnapped him. After the kidnapping, it is implied that he was manipulated by the despicable organization to work alongside them, where in reality, he was working as a double agent alongside Looker, an international police officer canon to the Pokemon universe to take Team Eclipse down for good. Additionally, he also sacrifices himself to save Tess from the flying crate that knocked him into the portal, which is the last we ever see Jake in Brick Bronze. One of the main reasons why Jake represents kindness and not any of the other Loomian Legacy characters is that he's the only character, other than Tess and the player, who has appeared in both Brick Bronze and Loomian Legacy. Therefore, he is able to make more of a positive impact on others than any other character across both games. Additionally, despite the amount of time he spent in Team Eclipse's clutches, he was never peer pressured into siding with their beliefs, and ultimately stuck to his own moral compass by partnering with Looker to stop them. His sacrifice for Tess also emphasizes his selflessness and ability to treat others with respect, which also makes him one of the few Loomian Legacy characters to put their life on the line for those they care about. However, his kindness doesn't just stop there. In Loomian Legacy, after he tries to steal the crystal in Galvanite Cave, he immediately apologizes to the player after he encounters them again. This shows that, whenever he makes a mistake, he goes out of his way to make up for it. He also encourages Mabel to step out of her comfort zone to explore Aurea with everyone else, helps the player locate the missing stone tablet shards upon joining the main friend group, and indirectly exposes Dr. Vanta's true nature by granting the player a key to Parlet Corp he stole, which will highlight how he prioritizes others' well-being over his own. While you could make the argument that Jake was being immoral when he stole the key card, it was ultimately for the correct reasons, as we all know that Dr. Vanta isn't exactly a better person than Jake either. Ultimately, Jake's compassion, moral code, heroism, and prominent screen time earned him the title of Loomian Legacy's representative of the virtue of kindness, while Jake spreads positivity through his actions in both Loomian Legacy and Brick Bronze. The first of 3 groups of characters is able to spread financial benefits with the virtue of charity. Charity is raising and donating money to those in need, and is the antithesis of the sin of greed. While I try to limit this video to 1 character per virtue, I'm making an exception for 3 entries, as in all 3 cases, the characters are so similar that it isn't worth choosing one over the other. The group of characters that represents charity is all of the Loomian trainers that can be rebattled. Throughout Loomian Legacy, you must battle both optional and mandatory trainers to progress through the story, and some of these trainers allow players to battle them more than once. Like the first time you battle them, they, and all of the other trainers in Loomian Legacy, give the players money as a reward for defeating them. What separates them from other Loomian Legacy trainers is that despite the numerous times players can battle them, they will always be there with money for them to obtain, no matter the huge dent it has on their financial status. However, the NPCs offer more than just money, as there's a whole page online full of useful Loomian trainers that are best for farming not just money, but also experience points and TPs. Some of these NPCs include Haddon, who can be found on Route 7, and is the one that currently gives the most money. Ray, who is located in the Atlanthean City Living District, and currently gives the most XP of any trainer that can be battled, and a bunch of trainers in Route 6 who all have teams that give out a singular type of TP, which can then be used to make creating competitive Loomians a lot easier. The NPC's donations towards players, not just with money, but also TPs and XP, make them worthy of the title of the charity virtue. Giving out tons of money at your own expense takes a lot of self-control, and the latter just so happens to be the topic of our next heavenly virtue, Temperance. Temperance is the means of restraining and controlling one's emotions, thoughts, actions, and behavior, and is the opposite of the deadly sin of gluttony. The Loomian Legacy character that symbolizes temperance the best is one you might not remember at first glance, Baxley. Baxley is the butler of the Ferrex family, and knowing this fact alone, it should be no surprise why he should exemplify temperance. Being a butler, the most prominent and natural skills that they all have in common are self-discipline and the ability to control their emotions. There have been two significant instances in Loomian Legacy where Baxley can demonstrate his self-control. The first is when he offers his guests in the second Atlanthean City update free dinner and hospitality alongside Ferrex, and despite Lucas' inability to pay attention to Baxley's directions before entering the mansion, he never lashes out at him and remains patient by keeping quiet and following through with his instructions. The other moment is when he successfully stops Mirden and his henchmen from obtaining the stone tablet shard and gives enough time for the player and their friends to escape, indicating how he only reacts strongly to a situation whenever the time is right. In that same scene, we also see how much Mr. Ferrex trusts him, which shows how much respect and confidence they have in each other's abilities. We unfortunately don't see much of Baxley's character after this story arc, but overall, his self-discipline, unquestioning loyalty towards his master, and willingness to protect those he cares about make him the best choice for the virtue of temperance. However, like with Baxley prioritizing the safety of his masters and guests, something you as the audience should prioritize is liking and subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed the video thus far. It motivates me to make more videos like this one, and I have so many cool ideas for ones I plan on making here in 2025. Anyway, let's continue with the video. On top of his self-restraint, you could also say that Baxley puts a lot of effort into the tasks he must complete as a butler, such as when he was preparing dinner, which is something he has in common with the character of Diligence. Diligence is contrary to the sin of sloth, and is the practice of consistent high effort and working hard, no matter the cost and difficulty of the tasks that need to be completed. Forced is the character that goes above and beyond when it comes to diligence, and here's why. Forced is the battle star of Sephirite City, and is best known for being the girl who survived a car crash caused by a mutagen accidentally set loose by Dr. Vanta. As a result, she not only lost one of her arms and both her legs, but also her parents as well. Additionally, she also lost all hope of doing anything due to her injuries, until Dr. Vanta offered her some cybernetic limbs, which boosted her confidence, and allowed her to become the battle star she's known for today. Despite the physical and mental trauma she faced at a very young age, Forced is still able to be successful in her position as Sephirite City's battle star. Just take a look at all she's accomplished in her position. She is currently the second hardest battle star as of making this video, and had to jump through tons of hoops for it as a result, such as hiring trainers to compete in the theater, coming up with puzzles for challengers to solve before challenging her, and most likely, scheduling, preparing, and accepting an interview to become a battle star. She is also knowledgeable enough with technology to grant the player the ability to gear-hop with their Lumi watch, which is a skill not many characters in Loomian Legacy can possess. However, a counter-argument to Forced representing Diligence is that she had to rely on Dr. Vanta and his artificial limbs to gain back her confidence. But, it was Forced, not Vanta, who accepted this revolutionary opportunity and made the decision to always put her all into everything she does from that point on. And once again, as I mentioned with Jake earlier, Dr. Vanta isn't exactly the angel that Force believes him to be, and I've proven this many times before in all of the videos I made about him and his criminal record. After the car crash which stripped Force of so much, she, from that point on, swore to put more than 100% effort into her job as Sephirite's Battlestar, thus not only gaining much respect and recognition from other characters, but also making her the perfect candidate for Diligence. Like with Forced, these next characters, who represent the virtue of chastity, are very hardworking, and not only dedicate themselves to their work, but also their family. Chastity contradicts the sin of lust, and is the refrain from immoral sexual desires and activity. It is best symbolized by our second group entry, the player's parents. While the player technically gets 2 pairs of parents, if you include the ones from Brick Bronze, I will only be talking about the ones in Loomian Legacy for the sake of this video. The player is first introduced to their mother in their home, who notifies them that their father wants to meet them at the mythic dig site. Once you arrive there, the 2 of you along with your dad's assistant Derek, witness a mysterious stone tablet shatter into several pieces and fly away due to unknown circumstances. Ultimately, you get recruited by both parents to locate the missing shards, and are given a beginner Loomian and advice on how to become a Loomian trainer as a result. From that point on, the player is in close contact with their parents throughout the story via their Loomian watch. Whether they have located a missing shard or successfully defeated a Battlestar, at least one of their parents will always be there with support for their success or advice for what is to come in the future. The reason why both parents represent chastity is not just because of their healthy marriage, but also, as I just established, the compassion they have towards their kid. Starting with their marriage, they have a relatively positive relationship with each other. They are never shown at any significant point to be arguing with one another, and despite them working 2 very different jobs, an archaeologist and Loomian researcher respectively, they are still able to find ways to collaborate and aid each other with their work. Similarly, their relationship with the player also has its positive traits. As mentioned earlier, they regularly check on them while they are on their journey through their Loomian watch, which implies how much they care about them and their safety. Additionally, they also trust them enough to assign them the dangerous mission of locating the missing tablet shards. What makes this mission so deadly is that the pieces can corrupt anyone who comes in close contact with them, and makes them go violent until they are defeated in battle. Although, an argument could be made that they aren't the most effective in teaching the player the difference between right and wrong. This is because they are somehow able to trespass into people's homes, and even intrude on Pollard Corp's headquarters, a restricted area, with the help of Jake and the keycard he gives them. However, I'd like to address a few issues with this argument. For the trespassing, it's likely the developers included this to provide more accessibility to the players, rather than for malicious intent. Also, why on earth would the developers add this feature for the latter reasons? For the player intruding in Pollard Corp, we can compare this to the previous situation we looked at when Jake broke into the corrupt organization, as while it was the wrong thing to do, it was for the correct reasons. Additionally, focusing on only the trespassing takes away from all of the other heroic deeds the player has accomplished. Because of their intrusion, the player is able to intercept the corrupted Protagon, which, if somehow let loose by Vanta, will pose a hazard towards not just the residences of Sephirite City, but also all of Roria. Other notable heroic accomplishments of the player include freeing various Loomians and people from the corruption of the tablet shards, intercepting a couple of bullies alongside Lucy, who are abusing a wild berry, and stopping Dr. Vanta for a second time when he tried to steal the Soul Heart, an ancient artifact that he was going to use to gain more power. Ultimately, while the player can sometimes make controversial decisions, their parents are in fact a positive role model towards them, and their healthy family dynamic cements them as the perfect candidates for chastity. Similar to the player's parents, this next character also has a daughter of their own that they deeply care about, and just so happens to be the subject of the next heavenly virtue, humility. Humility is defined as having a lack of arrogance, or believing oneself to not be superior to others in any way. It is also the antithesis of the deadly sin of pride, and the character who is easily the perfect depiction of this virtue is Mr. Ferrix, and here is how. Their first interaction with the player is when they and their friends ask him for tickets to travel to Atlantean City. While he at first declines their request, he later accepts it once the player saves his daughter Milia from a corrupt submarine attack. Later, in Atlantean Part 2, alongside Baxley as mentioned in the Temperance section, invites them and their friends to his mansion to stay for the night. He later appears after the group discovers Torty, a Makoro adopted by the Ferrex family, that is corrupted and encased in a test chamber, and explains to them the details of why he hid Torty, and apologizes for lying to his daughter. He also reveals that Dr. Vanta and Pollitt Corp offered to help Torty and inspect the stone tablet shard, but when Jake reveals their true motives, he ultimately believes him, and leads everyone to his submarine, while Baxley buys them time against Mirden and his goons. After the player and their allies infiltrate the Lost City and successfully defeat Dr. Vanta in battle with the assistance of Dakuda, Ferrex warns him one last time about the dangers the Soul Heart can possess, only for the corrupt CEO to ignore him and attempt to steal the Soul Heart, but fails. When the destruction of the Soul Heart causes a flood, everyone evacuates, and the last we ever see of Ferrex for now is in a side quest involving the player to unlock various Soul Burst evolutions. So after all of that, why exactly does Mr. Ferrex exemplify humility? Well, as I mentioned earlier, humility is all about having a relatively moderate or low opinion of oneself. And if we take a closer look at Mr. Ferrex's personality, we can see how perfectly he fits under this umbrella of a definition. Starting with when he was confronted for hiding Torty, it's in a similar situation to when Jake apologizes to the player in the kindness section of the video, as whenever he makes mistakes, he owns up to it, and apologizes to his daughter, rather than trying to make excuses to avoid accountability. This scene also reveals what he's truly like around his family, as no matter if the doors are closed or not, he treats Milia with respect, and makes up for whenever he's wronged her. Additionally, while he initially declined taking Torty to be examined when it was corrupted, he did accept Dr. Vanta's offer of assistance, and while he shouldn't have trusted Vanta in the first place, it does indicate that he doesn't rely solely on his own skills and abilities, which is an important component of humility. Also, the comic posted on the official Llama Train Studios on Twitter/X reveals another example of Mr. Ferrex putting forth his trust towards others. Despite him not trusting anyone the second time Torty was in trouble, he did trust the nurse when he first met them. Yet another case of Ferrex displaying his trust is when he instantly believes Jake's story of Pollitt Corp's shady motivations. This scenario is unique in its own right, as despite the player, Jake, and everyone else being younger than him, Ferrex still believes their story about Dr. Vanta and Pollitt Corp. Finally, whenever he constantly warns Dr. Vanta about the dangers of the Soul Heart in the Lost City, he doesn't do it in a condescending way, but rather in one takes into account the safety of everyone, even Dr. Vanta. Also, despite his concerns, he once again doesn't imply that he's better than him in any way, and his only goal is to warn Vanta of the consequences of his actions. For all of these reasons, it should be no surprise that Mr. Ferrex is a Loomian Legacy character that should symbolize the heavenly virtue of humility. We've finally made it to the last heavenly virtue of the video, patience. Patience juxtaposes the deadly sin of wrath, and is described as striving towards goals and enduring hardships without showing any frustration towards others. For this entry, however, the characters I've chosen may be a bit unusual compared to the rest of the ones I selected for the video. If you watched my 7 Deadly Sins as Loomian Legacy characters video, which you should check out if you haven't already once you're done with this one, you'll know that for one of the sins, envy, I chose the players due to how jealous we can get when hunting. Since the group of characters I've chosen for patience are technically Loomian Legacy players, I'm allowing myself to use them for an entry. However, these people aren't just players of Loomian Legacy, but also the creators of the game itself. That's right, the people I've selected for patience are none other than the developers of Loomian Legacy, Llama Train Studios. But why exactly did I pick them over any other Loomian Legacy character? Well, let's take a look at the current state of Loomian Legacy, and maybe that will answer most of your questions. One of the most prominent criticisms of Loomian Legacy is how far apart the updates to the main story are. For example, the last one, Atlantean Part 2, released over a year ago at the time of creating this video. You could scroll for hours on YouTube looking for videos on why Loomian Legacy is declining in popularity, and while the criticisms do bring up great points, such as the lack of communication between developers and players, it's important that we also take into account the way the developers respond to this. Despite the hundreds of complaints, they don't ever lash out at their fans, and continue to dedicate hours of their own time to pump out high quality updates for Loomian Legacy players to enjoy. These often contain new Loomians, characters, and music that they all need to design and code into the game, which further emphasizes the amount of dedication they have towards Loomian Legacy. While most of them are holiday themed, don't contribute to the main story, and sometimes containing glitches, they always have the latter fixed as soon as possible, and even provide compensations to the players for their mistakes like codes for boost tokens, power fruits, capture discs, and so on. You could make the simple argument that their lack of frustrations is due to them being mature adults, and while that may be true, several controversial YouTubers that have existed for the past few years have proven just because you're an adult doesn't necessarily mean you're mature and patient. Ultimately, the developer's ability to tolerate their fanbase whilst maintaining the ability to release top-notch updates secures them as my choice for the heavenly virtue of patience.